Hello and welcome to my next class. Today we'll come up with Richard Steele, Joseph Edison, Samuel Johnson. You must have read about them, and these are very famous writers you must have heard of. Now, I request you all, while I'm giving this presentation or while my other videos that are in a form of presentation, please listen to their audios too, because they carry important material. So I request you to listen to the audio part too. Now, we will today discuss about each and every important point of Richard Steele, Joseph Edison, and Samuel Johnson. Now, these you will here you'll get to know about how important they were in English literature, right? What important works they carry and how they were the part of this ancient English literature, the classical English literature. But before we begin, please, if you've yet not subscribed my channel, subscribe my channel and click on the bell icon so that you can be notified when I upload my next video. Now let's start without wasting our time. The very first, Richard Steele. The first work of Steele, the Christian hero, published in 1701, where he compares Romans to Christian. Now, the very first work of Richard Steele. But who was Richard Steele? He was an Irish writer, and he is remembered for the very magazine. He was a co-founder with Joseph Edison. He founded the magazine named the Tatler, which was very famous. And I should let you know that from each exam point of view, this work, this magazine, the Tatler, or the upcoming that we'll take of Joseph Edison's, that is the Spectator, is very important. Now, let's know about Richard Steele. He was an Irish writer, and his first work was The Christian Hero. And this work was published in 1701. And here he tries to compare Romans to Christians, right? He says he actually wanted to show that the sort of hero who preserves in every circumstances is best made by Christian virtues. A very simple one that you just have to remember this work, because we are talking about Richard Steele, so we should know some other works. And when it was published, 1701. Now, it was Richard Steele and Joseph Edison who laid the foundation of the periodical essays in the 18th century. In 18th century, the main foundation of these periodical essay was by these great Richard Steele and Joseph Edison. Now, when we talk about Richard Steele, he started a magazine. Richard Steele started a magazine in collaboration with Joseph Edison, that is the Tatler. And its first edition came into notice in 1709. Now, what was the purpose of writing this journal, or you can say magazine, the essays that were present in this particular, the Tatler? What were they? We should know. So the main purpose of writing this journal was, in the words of Richard Steele, if you say, within quotes, the general purpose of this paper is to expose the false art of life, to puff off the disguises of cunning, vanity, and affectation, and to recommend a general simplicity in our discourse and our behavior. What he tried to say was, his purpose in writing this paper was to expose, or want to tell, that people are living falsely. They don't know the art of life, how to live, and they should bring concealment in their appearance, because they being cunning and they have excessive pride, and the behavior, the speech and the writing they design to impress is wrong. He just wanted to represent this falseness, or you can say the false art of life that people live in. He said that they should, he recommends in fact that in general there should be simplicity in our writing, in our spoken communication and our behavior, right? So through these through this the Tatler, he wanted to convey that the general purpose was to bring a general simplicity in our discourse and our behavior discourses when we write or speak something, the way we communicate while speaking or while we write, and to bring simplicity in our behavior too. Okay, now the first edition came into notice was 1709, and don't forget that it was dedicated, the first volume of it, only the first volume of it was dedicated to Mr. Manning Warning. Okay. Now, when the other points that we should go through is that it appeared 3 times a week. This particular magazine, this particular paper or journal, you can say, it appeared 3 times a week, and the paper was to contain accounts of pleasure, entertainment, poetry, learning, foreign and domestic news. All kinds of small articles were there in this Tatler, right? A large portion of this paper was from the pen of Richard Steele, and few articles were written by Joseph Edison. Now, the means the Tatler was generally written, means a large portion of it was written by Richard Steele, and there were very few articles that was written by Joseph Edison. Correct? So this was all about the Tatler. I hope this is clear. Now moving on, when we see, he was also a great figure in writing sentimental comedies. He has also written sentimental comedies, and is counted as a great figures in writing these comedies. The three of them are as follows. जैसे Lying Lover, that was published in 1703, Tender Husband 1705, The Conscious Lovers, that is 1722. So you just have to know their names, need not go in detail. Please remember about the Tatler. The very first work was The Christian Hero. Then the main that Richard Steele is known for, the Tatler, his magazine, the founder of it, that was published in 1709 with the collaboration of Joseph Edison, but the large portion of this paper was written from the pen of Richard Steele, and there were few articles by Joseph Edison. Now, he was also counted as a great figure in writing sentimental comedies that I have already told you. So this was all about Richard Steele. I hope this is clear. Now, moving on to Joseph Edison. So talking about Joseph Edison, he was a known essayist, and he was also famous for his poetries. Look, Edison was a famous poet and dramatist also. But today when we look at Joseph Edison, he is known in the people, and people know him as an essayist. Correct? Now, he holds a good position, or you can say a renowned position as a poet by his poem The Campaign, which was published in 1704. In this poem, he praises Malberg, and he had pictured him on a scale of epic, where he shows his impressive appearance, and he has pictured him in a different caricature. Correct? So the poem Campaign, from where he got the renowned position as a poet, and was published in 1704. Now Joseph Edison, he also wrote a classical tragedy, that is Cato. and was published in 1713, where characters are um, or you can say character shows fine sentiments and they're expressed in the dullest of Augustan verse. Verse, I hope you all know, typically having a rhyme, the metrical rhyme is your verse. So you just have to remember that he has written a classical tragedy, that is Cato, which is important from the point of net examination. This question has been asked, I guess, which was published in 1713, and you should know that here he expresses the fine sentiments of the characters but in the dullest of Augustan verse. Okay, but after this publication after this publication, he was known as the dramatist of the age. Okay, now he's being poet, now he's being dramatist. Now what about his essayist, right? After the Tatler, we come into notice about the journal or the magazine by Joseph Edison, The Spectator. He wrote together with Richard Steele, but again, Joseph Edison here has more contribution towards The Spectator, right? Now, the first issue of The Spectator appeared on 1711, and its main aim was to show a real and faithful picture of 18th century society. Now, in this Spectator, if you see the difference between Spectator and Tatler, it was published thrice in the week. Tatler 3 बार publish होती थी, whereas it was published daily. And this magazine was in the form of long essay, whereas in Tatler it contained short articles on different subject. But here, Spectator, it does not carry the subject politics. यहाँ पे ये subject बस नहीं था, बाकी everything was present, right? Now, what was the main aim behind writing this Spectator? Its main aim was to show true or a real picture and the faithful picture of 18th century society. It was the mirror of the age कह सकते हो, जहाँ पे ball dances, club sittings and literary discussions, सब कुछ, everything was there. So Spectator, इसका पहला issue कब appear हुआ? 1711, and it wanted to show a true picture of 18th century society, right? It can also be called the mirror of the age. And Richard Steele and Joseph Edison also wanted to bring a moral and social reform in the conditions of the time. उस टाइम पे जो conditions थी उसमें भी changes लाना चाहते थे. They wanted to bring moral and social both reforms in the conditions of the time. Now, there were total of 555 essays in The Spectator, correct? Now, when we talk about Spectator, Edison wrote 274 essays. How many? 274 essays were written by Edison, correct? Now, in Spectators, there were 35 scholarly papers out of total 555. इसमें से 35 scholarly papers भी थे, ठीक है? Scholarly papers. In this paper, Edison paid extra heed on the character portrayal, and characters of Sir Roger Coverley, Sir Andrew Freeport, Templars were finely drawn. अब Templars कौन होते हैं? These are the fellow soldiers of Christ, or you can say a member of a military religious order. Okay, so these are Templars. A kind of soldier, you can say, a religious one, right? Now, some papers were for discussion and criticism of paradise law. इसमें जो कवर्ली पेपर्स थे, इसमें से कुछ पेपर्स they were for discussion and few were जो पैराडाइज लॉज को क्रिटिसाइज कर रहे थे. कुछ पेपर्स डिस्कस करने के लिए थे और कुछ क्रिटिसिज्म पे बेस्ड थे. आई होप दिस इज क्लियर, right? These papers were written from the different standpoint of view of novel. Now, these Coverley paper was thought to be a novel, as when we talk about a novel, what we think of it, that a novel is complete when it contains plot, character, dialogue, setting and description. एंड कवर्ली पेपर्स में ये सारी चीजें प्रेजेंट थी. दैट मीन्स उसमें प्लॉट भी था, कैरेक्टर भी था, डायलॉग भी था और उसमें सेटिंग्स और डिस्क्रिप्शंस वर आल्सो प्रेजेंट. बट एट लास्ट व्हेन वी से इट इज क्लियर दैट कवर्ली पेपर वाज रिटन फ्रॉम डिफरेंट पर्पस एंड डिफरेंट मैनर. उसका जो एक पर्पस था और जो मैनर था दैट वाज डिफरेंट. They have it contains many characteristics of a novel, but it doesn't make a novel. Correct? So यहाँ पे जो important points हमने पढ़े हैं, poem The Campaign 1704, dramatist classical tragedy थी Cato 1713. कंफ्यूज होने की जरूरत नहीं है. जब हम स्पेक्टेटर की बात करते हैं, 274 papers were written by Joseph Edison in this Spectator. Spectator लॉन्ग ऐसे के फॉर्म में था. इसमें कौन सा सब्जेक्ट नहीं प्रेजेंट था? पॉलिटिक्स. करेक्ट. नाउ इसका मेन पर्पस क्या था? मेन एम था was to show a real and faithful picture of 18th century. In this Spectator there were 35 Coverley papers out of total 555 papers. ठीक है. इसमें एडिसन में किसमें हीट पे की है? इन द पोर्ट्रेल्स ऑफ कैरेक्टर, और किनके कैरेक्टर्स दैट आई हैव रिटन. करेक्ट. नाउ मूविंग ऑन टू द मोस्ट important, that is Dr. Samuel Johnson. When we talk about Dr. Samuel Johnson, he was a son of a small bookseller, but he was intelligent and he was fond of literature from a very small age, right? So talking about Johnson, Dr. Johnson, the very first poem was London. ठीक है. It was written in the style of Juvenal. He was also a satirist writer, and in this poem he shows or describes Thales' journey to Wales in order to escape from the problems of London. It tells the good and sins of city life. It tells you about everything good and bad about that city life, viewed from the poet's point of view, which was quite depressing, and he wanted to escape out of all this. So the very first poem, London, by Samuel Johnson, just you have to remember that was written in the style of Juvenal when it was published 1738. इसका छोटा सा description बस इतना सा आपको याद रखना है, that it describes Thales' journey to Wales. और यहाँ पे it shows कि he wanted to escape from the problems. So he wanted to run away from all the goods and sins of city life that he is trying to tell, which were depressive, and so he wanted to escape. The second poem was Vanity of Human Wishes. It was also written in the style of Juvenal, which was his second poem, where the speaker examines all the mankind. When we say that he examines all the mankind, so what he wanted, the way in which there were various kind of dreams present, the ambitions that were present, and he tries to say that these dreams and ambitions at last come to nothing. Poet here discusses about all powers like financial power, intellectual power, political, which he thinks to be pointless and which does not give any satisfaction. He says that all these power are there but of no use. They are pointless and they won't give us any satisfaction, right? And in order to find contentment, he also tells people that if you want to find contentment and peace, then one should go through the way of God and should have faith in God. Correct? So this is all about vanity of human wishes. देखो vanity of human wishes से ही आपका explanation सामने आ जाता है, right? I hope this is clear. Please remember the poems written by Samuel Johnson, first London, that is 1738, second Vanity of Human Wishes. I think Vanity of Human Wishes say they have asked some question, right? So please remember all these explanation too. He was known as the writer of the age of transition. ठीक है? Dr. Samuel Johnson, he was the most important writer of the age of transition, when there was a change. Age of transition, age of एक बीच का पीरियड आया था जिसे हम एज ऑफ ट्रांजिशन कहते हैं. सो ही वॉज द मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट राइटर ऑफ दैट टाइम. Now, he has written a variety of essays or various essays for his paper, The Rambler and The Idler. Now, from here we start with the prose works of Dr. Samuel Johnson. ठीक है, यहाँ से यहाँ तक तो इनकी पोएट्री थी, टिल वैनिटी ऑफ ह्यूमन विशेस तक. अब इनके प्रोज वर्क के बारे में हम बात करेंगे. सो डॉक्टर जॉनसन रोट वेरियस एसेज फॉर हिज पेपर्स, द रैम्बलर एंड द आइडलर. उनके पेपर का क्या नाम था? द रैम्बलर एंड द आइडलर, विद अ वैरायटी ऑफ सब्जेक्ट्स इन इट बट ऑफ सीरियस काइंड एंड फिल्ड विद डीप थॉट्स. नाउ these papers or these essay that does not contain any wit or humor like that of Edison. ठीक है, एडिसन की तरह essays नहीं थे, they were of serious kind. And this paper appeared twice a week and it was filled with deep, astounding thoughts and observation of the poet of transition, that is Dr. Johnson. This paper deals with different variety of subjects but of serious morals or kinds. And classicism can be marked in Johnson's essay than that of Edison's. He wrote in a classical way. Classicism was very important in his essays, and that can be seen in his essays. So the very first prose work, or you can say where he has written various essays on different variety of subjects, was Rambler and the Idler. ठीक है, इसके बाद इन्होंने एक philosophical novel and a known prose work by Dr. Johnson was Rasselas or Prince of Abyssinia. ठीक है. Now, when we say Rasselas, it is a known prose work of Dr. Johnson. Okay, and it tells us the personality of a young prince of Abyssinia called as Rasselas. Now, this story tells about how this prince escaped through the secluded palace, which was away from the outer world, and he being secluded from the outer world, he escapes from that palace and he get to know about different kind of people. Through this novel, one gets to know about to what this prince sees and to what all discussion he enters into. There were many subjects that are discussed in this poem, like learning and of nature. So let's not get into deep into it, but you have to remember that this work, this philosophical novel or the very known prose work of Dr. Johnson was Rasselas, or it can be said as Prince of Abyssinia. Many times they ask you the other name of the poem, so you should remember this, right? Now, he also wrote Dictionary of English language, and it carries some defects. Dr. Johnson took 8 years to complete the dictionary of English language, and it was a great contribution to this to the scholarship if we see, and it carries several weakness, like there was poor pronunciation, some meanings were incorrect, जो etymology थी was inaccurate, quotations did not have they lacked dates and references. Overall, if we see his dictionary, it was a superior one, but it carries some defects. Okay, so please remember that he has also written dictionary of the English language, which is important work. Now coming to preface to Shakespeare. Now Johnson's preface to Shakespeare, it was a classical work where he tells about the defects and the good works of Shakespeare. Right? It was published in, this work was published in, please remember I have not written it, it was published in 1765. Right? And it tells about Shakespeare's, he also criticizes the defects that it contains, and he also appreciates the good works of Shakespeare. So please remember Johnson's preface to Shakespeare. So overall, if you see, important point, very first poem London, then we have Vanity of Human Wishes, he was known as the writer of the age of transition. Then we have the very first prose work where he has written various essays on the variety of subjects, the Rambler and the Idler. Then his very important prose work, Rasselas or Prince of Abyssinia. Then he wrote Dictionary of the English Language, and last but not the least, Johnson's preface to work. Now here we end with Richard Steele, Joseph Edison and Dr. Samuel Johnson, but at last still there is some left. That is an important note. James Boswell was a young man of 22 when he first met Dr. Johnson, and he was really influenced by Dr. Johnson, so he wrote the best biography of 18th century, that is Life of Johnson. Life of Johnson, please don't forget, was written by James Boswell, and this classical biography shows a true and vivid picture of Dr. Johnson's. This work was published in 1761, but after the death of Johnson. I hope this is clear. Very simple. James Boswell, he wrote the best biography of 18th century, that is Life of Johnson. So keep watching and please go through all videos. They're very important for each and every student of English literature. Thank you and meet you in my next class.